dive in the deep end. It's time to defend your movie.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Defending Your Movie. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. So this week's episode is one of our first, real, truly, horror films. We've covered a couple films within the genre, but never one is, straight out in the genre as this one. And from a genre of horror that was always one that I never cared much about. I was never a big slasher fan, and honestly, this franchise in particular, Friday the 13th, was always my least favorite in the slasher genre, just because the films always seemed so repetitive to me and just kind of uninteresting. But today's guest, JD Martin, who is from the Comics Quest podcast and Fables and Reflection podcast, he convinced me to watch our movie for today, which is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, which is the one that kind of pivots the franchise into the franchise that everybody remembers and everybody thinks of when they think of Jason, which we kind of get into that in the episode. But this one, it was a lot of fun, and he really helped me put this franchise and this kind of movie into perspective, put it in terms that kind of made a little more sense to me and actually made me enjoy it a lot more and possibly convinced me to finally go through and watch the entire franchise. So without further ado, let's get into the episode because it is a fun one today and a little longer than your average. So before we get into the show, you can find all of our plugs and everything on our link tree, but look for us on Twitter at Defending Movie and on Instagram at Defending Movie. You can also find our merch store at belowthecollar.com/defendingyourmovie. Just put up some new t-shirt designs for the holidays, some really great ones. A couple inspired by the MCU and a Matrix design. Be sure to pick up one of the shirts, go see a movie, snap a photo of you in the shirt and send it to me, and I'll send you a free shirt from the website. Anything from Below the Collar. There's some really good stuff. Doesn't have to be one of mine, but can be one of mine. So yeah, throw that out there. Also, don't forget, we are always sponsored by the Cryptic Closet. Go to crypticcloset.com. Get your horror-themed merchandise. Perfect for this episode. There's actually some really great Jason-inspired designs on Cryptic Closet. Actually, some of my favorite designs on there are Jason-inspired. So be sure to go check those out. Use promo code DEFEND on checkout and get 21% off your order. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode on Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives.
There's one there. It is just the first 8 movies in a single Blu-ray case. And then I believe it was Shout Factory. They released a giant $150 box set that has every movie. I think it even has Freddy vs. Jason. Plus it has several discs of commentaries and behind the scenes and documentaries all come on. And it's this giant box set. I know you've probably seen him in the chat. That guy with the camera is I think it's the only one that I know who has that box set. And yeah. I'm extremely jealous, and one day I'm going to either get that or just get the main run.
Yeah, so we can actually just dovetail right into this then, since we're talking about it. Yeah, I did guarantee I know somebody who probably has that box set. I have a coworker who is just all in on this kind of stuff. But have you always been a Friday the 13th fan, or a slasher fan in general?
So it's funny that we're talking about this franchise because it's actually Friday the 13th that got me into horror. So when I was a child, the closest I got to horror was the Disney movie The Black Cauldron, which to this day remains one of my all-time favorite Disney movies. It is a classic. It is deeply flawed. It is a major compromise of a great book series, but it makes up for everything in wonderful animation and a great score and a beautiful, haunting atmosphere. And outside of that, there was also Scooby-Doo and the Blade trilogy. like while everyone was getting into Spider-Man and X-Men, I was getting into Blade.
Yeah.
And that was my thing. I remember watching the third movie for the first time. I watched it as a TV edited version on Spike TV. So this would have been
Oh, wow.
yeah, and the movie came out in '05. So this must have been either late 2005 or early 2006 when I first saw it. And because I was at the time, I must have been I must have been like 7 years old. So I was terrified when I first watched Blade Trinity, but I was also quite intrigued by it. And eventually I got over my fear of them, and just because I just kept watching them and watching them over and over again. And it wasn't until I was about 11 years old. We had just moved back to Texas after living in Washington State for about a year and a half to 2 years. And at the height of the disc Netflix craze, one of the movies I asked for us to rent was the original Friday the 13th. Don't exactly remember why, but I just asked to, and I watched it through a crack in my bedroom door while I was outside, because it scared the ever living shit out of me, and that started like my burgeoning love of horror. I then like moved on to Psycho, The Exorcist, Halloween, The Evil Dead, Rosemary's Baby, and I just kept going and going and going. And it actually wasn't until I think like maybe my sophomore year of high school, might have even been my junior year, I watched the first four, binged them one night, and then for a long time I just stopped watching slashers. I just wasn't interested in them for a good long while, until after I graduated high school, and then I got back into them. And I don't know, I love slashers. I love a good fun slasher. That's why I particularly love the Friday the 13th movies. They just kind of feed my little horror soul. And yeah, I mean, I love Nightmare on Elm Street. I love the Halloween franchise. Except I feel like the Friday the 13th just has just that quick, dumb, popcorn fueled fun that other franchises don't.
That's maybe a really good way to put it. This is the popcorn movies of the horror films.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, you going to see like a Fast and Furious movie or something, like you're going there for dumb action.
Mm-hmm.
In a Friday the 13th movie, you're going there for dumb kills. Versus like Halloween, like has that, but some of those movies also have something to say. Like maybe lesser in some of the sequels. But like I'm not a huge slasher guy. Like for me, Scream kind of killed the slasher for me, because I was like, well, that was great, but they showed you all the holes, and like I was never like a big slasher guy. And that's why for me Friday the 13th was always kind of the lowest on the list when you think of like, you know, Ghostface, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason. I was like, well, those movies are kind of just a one-trick pony, versus some of those other ones are a little more interesting to me. But like watching this one today, which I literally watched it today while I was at work and stuff, which I knew this one, you know, it's a little different from some of the others. But I was like, it is just kind of fun. And like, it literally is just Jason moving from scene to scene and just doing things.
And that's totally fine. That's what the franchise is supposed to be. And I want to kind of dig into the history on like how this movie came about, because it's quite fascinating, and like the influences that fueled the creation of this movie, because it's really, really weird. And also, so my introduction. So this movie, for the listeners who don't know, is written and directed by Tom McLaughlin. It was his second film after his debut, a little movie called One Dark Night, which is it's fine. It's just like a little gothic horror movie about a teenage girl who, through like a hazing ritual, is told to spend a night in a mausoleum, and then dead things start popping out. As they do. And that was released in 1983. This was released in 1986. Funny thing, this movie is like 86 minutes long. And that's the thing is
Yes.
I think one of the reasons why these movies are like that disposable popcorn fueled fun is that they're so short. Like,
Oh, they're all just in and
yeah,
out.
and I think that's the reason. Like, I believe the worst movies in the franchise are the ones that go past like the 95, 96 minute mark. Like my least, and even then there are, of course, there are certain ones that like go, that are still are short and are still aren't very good. But like Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan is like 100. I think it's like just over 100 minutes long, and I'm like, it doesn't need to be this long, guys. You're literally making a movie about freaking Jason Voorhees cutting up teenagers with a machete. It doesn't need to be that long. So,
Not to mention they're only in Manhattan for like 20
oh, I
minutes.
know. Because I actually, I only watched, I think it's parts 5, 7, and 8 were the ones that I never got to for some reason. And I watched those for the first time a few months back, when I decided to just like sit and rewatch all of them and then watch the ones I hadn't seen. When I got to Jason Takes Manhattan, I'm just like, I mean, they're on a yacht for way too long, and then we get to Manhattan, and it's just upsetting. That movie is upsetting. I don't like it. I think it's the one that, and then the following movie, Jason Goes to Hell, are the ones that I don't have fun watching them. But I love this movie. I love Tom McLaughlin. I love the fact that he decided I want to go in a completely different direction than the rest of the franchise, because the previous 5 movies were pretty straightforward, standard slasher flicks, with,
Yeah.
they not much there to do. With this one, he's like, no, I want to bring in gothic influence. I remember reading about him talking about like his major like 2 influences on the opening scene were like Frank Capra and David Lean. He is dropping names left and right throughout this movie. There's a road known as Cunningham Road, nod to,
I did pick up on
yeah,
that.
who's the director of the first movie, Sean S. Cunningham. And then you have the next town over is called Carpenter, John Carpenter, who helped define the slasher flick in America.
Yeah, directed Halloween, which was pretty much what everything was based off of from that point on.
Yeah,
Wasn't the original Friday, they were blatantly just like, no, we were just trying to rip off
oh,
Halloween.
for sure. Giallo films, the Italian Giallo films were like the start of the slasher craze. Blood and Black Lace is one of the earliest examples. And then I believe it was 1974, Bob Clark directed Black Christmas, and that directly influenced John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, and that was like just peak slasherdom. That was the peak, and then everything following that was just a carbon copy of it. Everything from the Prowler, Happy Birthday to Me, Chopping Mall, all of this stuff, Sleepaway Camp, Alice, Sweet Alice, all these movies were just taking away from Halloween. And Friday the 13th especially. Friday the 13th, as they said, we're just building up. Like, it was in 1980, so it was just 2 years removed, not even 2 years removed from that movie. I mean, they would have been filming the year after, just mere months, because I believe Halloween, the original, came out in like November of 78. So they would have been shooting the first Friday the 13th just mere months after Halloween. So it was a direct copy of Halloween. No shame.
Yeah, and they pumped these out quick. The first 3 all came out a year apart.
Oh yeah,
and
this
then
franchise,
it was like 4, 5, 6, all also a year
yeah,
apart.
like the original 8 movies span the 80s decade. The first coming out in 1980, and Jason Takes Manhattan coming out in 1989. So they spanned the entire decade.
It's crazy.
It's insane. And it also helps that nearly every movie had a completely different director and writing team. The only person to direct more than one Friday movie is Steve Miner, and he directed 2 and 3. And he goes from like making one of the better ones to making one of the lesser ones.
Yeah.
And of course, what is one of the reasons why Part 3 is one of the lesser ones? It's too long. you could cut like a good 10 minutes out of that movie. You could cut like the whole motorcycle gang plot out of it, subplot. It'd be even better. It'd be so much better. We're not talking about that movie though.
Yeah. And that's one of the only ones I've never seen.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fun, you know. But it's just a little too long, and you can say that about most of the movies. Not this one though. I think this one's kind of the perfect length, and I think they had cut out quite a bit, and even added in. They added in a lot of like a couple of kills because they were apparently this movie almost got a PG-13 rating, and the studio was afraid, so they asked to put in more kills to get an R rating because
yeah, this whole franchise is very weird with violence. Like, everybody thinks of these movies as being super violent, but they were kind of attacked by the MPAA every time they released a movie, and like a lot of the violence in this is actually off screen or kind of cut around. Like, specifically the one I think about is where he literally twists a girl's head around and rips it off. And, like, you see him kind of twist it around. They cut away as he rips it off, but you hear the noise. And they kind of cut back, and you see, like, oh, her head is now detached. Like, they're really kind of tame, especially by today's standards.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that specific kill, because that was one of the ones they added in later. It was there was a novelization. I forget who the writer was, but that, like, in the novelization, that kill isn't even like written about. It was all it said was like she got they had the scene of her getting ripped out of the cabin and through the window, and then cuts to another scene, and then we see her head pop up in the police car later that's in the movie. So they went back and added the scene of her getting her head twisted off. Also the scene of like there's the couple who are like having a picnic in the woods at night. Like you do. But like them getting murdered was them getting like impaled back to back was added in. I believe all that, and as well as the cemetery caretaker getting killed by his own bottle of liquor was also added in.
Which one of my favorite characters in the movie, honestly. He is kind of fun. Which most of the characters in this movie are super forgettable. Like I think with most of the Friday movies. Like I remember was it Tommy Jarvis?
Yeah.
Is that his last name? Because he's in multiple movies, that character, even though it's a different actor. But the only like 3 characters I guess 4, is Tommy, Megan, Court, and that the caretaker, because the caretaker has like my favorite line of the movie, which is a clear bash towards critics, which is, you know, what kind of sick people find this entertaining or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I believe
clearly talking about the movie.
I don't have my notes with me. They're like right out of hand, right out of my reach right now. But I believe the line is some, like, he looks directly into the camera and says, "Some folks have a funny idea of entertainment, or a strange idea of entertainment." Yeah. Which I think was like directed. That was really like directed at the audience, because it's like you keep coming back to these movies because they keep making money. So it's like you keep coming back to this because teens keep getting killed. It's really
Which
funny.
Siskel and Ebert like notoriously always ripped these movies apart and just called them like trash.
Especially Gene Siskel.
I think that was
Siskel hated these movies, and it's really weird. Gene Siskel, I believe it was Gene Siskel, when the first movie came out, he doxed the lead actor in that movie, the lead actress. He doxed her in his review. He found out where she lived, and in his review,
that's true.
He like said like, "Hey, if you're reviled by this, if you find this movie reviling like I do, go to her house and tell her how you feel." And I'm just like, God, Siskel,
that's
moron. Awful. I mean, looking back on that today, it's just like even at that time was just such an awful and weird thing to do to someone.
Yeah, I've actually seen that video clip. Like it's insane that he just thought that was okay.
Yeah. Siskel, weird dude. And of course, continuing a trend with him, like he of course bashed this movie as well, which, come on, this movie's fun. It's fun it's disposable fun, and like you talking about like all the characters that you don't remember. Like I remember the characters, but mostly because I've seen this movie multiple times. I try to watch it every year. maybe even twice a year. Just
Yeah,
because.
this was the first watch for me. So, like, some of it I was familiar with just because, like, while I've never seen this whole franchise, I have watched tons of, like, retrospectives and, like, video reviews and stuff on all of these movies. So, like, I have passing familiarity with this, but, like, going in, I was like, oh, is this the one with the dude from Back to the Future whose name, Crispin Glover or whatever?
Part 4.
But I was like, oh, no, that's 4.
That's part 4. Yeah, with him and his weird hair, his floppy hair and his weird dancing, and him, possibly, possibly gonna sleep with one twin sister, but he winds up sleeping with the other one.
Yeah, but like going in, I was like, oh, like I immediately enjoyed the like setting and the tone they were putting off, like in the first 5 minutes in that cemetery scene. Like it feels like it had a production value that's a little higher than your average Friday movie at this point.
Yeah, like Tom McLaughlin specifically wanted to give a nod to the Hammer movies that he loved as a child, and have that they shot that whole. Most of this movie shot on location, but that opening scene with Tommy and his friend Hawes going to Jason's grave, that was shot on a soundstage, and so that way they could control all of the wind and fog and make it real, like have this beautiful gothic atmosphere. It's like that felt right for McLaughlin, because that coming off of making an entire 88-minute gothic horror movie already, that was him just bringing in his own flavor to it, and then having him set the tone right away with a parody of the James Bond gun barrel.
Oh God,
scene,
yeah.
which was so fun. Like, I remember hearing about that before I saw the movie, and then when I finally watched the movie, I was just like, fuck yes, this is exactly what I want. I want 8 more of these.
I was familiar with that being the opening to one of the movies. I forgot it was this one, so I was kind of excited when that popped up.
Yeah. Especially
because I'm a big James Bond fan, so I was like, "Oh
yeah, absolutely." And this movie is really funny too, because there are a lot of this movie is a major outlier within the franchise for a number of reasons. Like, it's the one that it has the most overt comedy, especially involving Jason. When the character that he pulls through the window, Sissy, when he pulls her through, there's a cutaway shot to her slippers falling on the floor. Which is, I think, is a little fun gag. There's the moment when he kills the misogynistic paintball player, rips and he wants he just wants the machete, and he rips the dude's arm off, and but you don't even know it until you cut back to Jason, and then he lifts the arm and machete up into frame, and it's just looking at it I'm that strong? Holy shit.
Yeah, this one felt like it. For the first, I don't not being super familiar with the franchise, feels like the first time they were kind of making it a comedy as well as a horror film.
Yes.
I know there's probably some humorous stuff in the first 5, but this one, it felt like, oh no, just fuck it. Just throw everything against the wall. We're making a ridiculous movie, but kind of making it scary. I was super into the tone of this one, more so than I thought I would be.
Yeah. Yeah, and it helps also to have other outlier elements to this movie. I don't know if you noticed, but this is the only movie in the franchise to have no nudity.
I did notice there is a sex scene, but there's no nudity, and I was very surprised by that, because I was just kind of waiting, all right, where's the scene with the boobs? What's going to happen, and it did.
Yeah, not. I mean, in the previous movie, in part 5, there is a scene in which a woman literally is standing in front of a mirror, and she she's a waitress at a diner, and she opens up her shirt and goes in front of a mirror and just, it's showtime, from all that jazz, and just popping her boobs out, because that was what the franchise was for a long time until this one. This is also the one, and also going back to that sex scene, something I've never noticed, but apparently if you actually pay attention in that scene, whenever the song stops and the girl, I think her name's Nikki, she climbs off of Court, you can hear him ripping a condom off. Yeah,
Oh,
so
really?
because
I
like
didn't
Tom
know
McLaughlin
this.
like said that he's like I wanted to promote safe sex with that. I was like, okay, good.
That's
yeah,
great.
Good, yeah, that's good.
That's actually awesome.
Yeah, and like and him talking about like one of the reasons why like because apparently the actor who played Nikki, Tom McLaughlin went to her and asked her if she would go topless in that scene. And since they had never, this was like never a discussion point between the two of them, like she refused. And he later said that he felt uncomfortable asking her. And the reason he asked her was just because the producers wanted that to happen. But he didn't really want it. And he was happy when she said no. And because he also felt that like he didn't like the idea that like from the previous movies that like sex equates death in these movies. It's like, no, that's stupid. So yeah, I love those little touches that he had. Also, this is the first movie to have Jason actually get resurrected.
Yeah,
because
I was gonna say that I feel like when a lot of people think of a Friday the 13th movie, that this one actually sets the standard for what people think of. Because like I feel like if you ask anybody, like, hey, who is Jason? They're gonna be like, oh, like this zombie dude who can't die, who's just killing people with a machete. But, like, I think people don't realize how much connectivity there actually is in the Friday the 13th franchise. Like, to the point where he gets the axe in his face in 3, and then that mark is in the hockey mask for the entire franchise from that point on.
yeah, and the only time, like, you could argue that at the end of the first movie, he is technically resurrected by, like, the death of his mother, but my headcanon is that he was never dead. He was just, like, in a coma at the bottom of the lake, and, like, his mother's death awakened him, so he was alive the whole time, and he just kind of popped up like, hey! And then
I heard a theory that, like, he was alive and just wandering lost in the woods, and he happens to stumble across his mom as she got decapitated, which they kind of use in the remake a bit, like the opening of the remake, where he sees his mom get decapitated, but or you know, she's clearly crazy. Maybe he was around the whole time and she just didn't notice because she's out of her mind. You know, like, there's definitely a question to how it works there, but I feel like there's ways to kind of talk around it.
yeah, but it wasn't until
I always took that scene from the original as like a dream.
yeah, and it wasn't until the end of the fourth movie when he was like legitimately dead. Tommy Jarvis legitimately chopped him to pieces. And it was in the fifth movie, which was called A New Beginning. And there's the reason because it's called A New Beginning is because Jason's not in it at all. It is the Halloween 3 of this franchise. Like, Jason's not in it at all. They wanted to like introduce a new killer, and you know, spoilers for a movie from like 1985. You know, it's revealed that the killer with a very different Hawking mask throughout that entire movie is actually an EMT who snapped after seeing the body of his dead son. And the end of the movie the very final scene of the movie implies that Tommy is supposed to be the killer. But people didn't like that. So they took away that idea, and Tom McLaughlin introduced the idea that like, no, he just, you know, it was another dream sequence that Pam had. Like in this movie, he's actually he's driving Pam, the woman who survived at the end of part 5. He's driving her truck in this movie, so like presumably like they were able to, you know, become close, and most likely like either she passed away or you know, she just no longer had use for it, but she, you know, gave him his truck or gave him her truck, and now he's driving, and it's the one that he's driving throughout the movie. Yeah, but like, so this is the first one to have him being resurrected, and he gets resurrected in the most Frankenstein way possible of getting struck by lightning twice. And through that becoming an unstoppable murder machine, because he's like just absolutely freaking immortal in this movie. It's great.
Yeah, and I honestly think if you were going to keep this franchise going, that they made the best choice possible. But it does also lead to this weird moment where because they talk about they have to have a weakness for him, and for some reason Tommy Jarvis just knows like, oh well, we got to sink him in the lake. Like, I think there's, like, a throwaway moment of him, like, reading a book where he maybe gets the idea.
Yeah, I think
but
it's
kind of
called,
just thrown in there.
Oh, God, it's in my notes, and I can't reach him right now. It's like a something to, like, an introduction to occultism or a companion to occultism, something like that. And I saw that, and I immediately thought, like, yes, required reading for all horror movie characters. And but like
Yeah, and like who's to say that book would even be correct?
yeah, who knows? But I mean, like, even I mean, it feels like even Tommy's like he seems very sure of himself, but you have to think like I don't know. I feel like Tommy is like questioning this himself, but he's just trying here. He just wants to get rid of Jason. Like that's his whole deal. That's like the way the movie opens. That's why he gets resurrected. Is that Tommy was just he's dealing with large amounts of trauma from the event, from what Jason did to him as a child. So, he lashes out at Jason's corpse, which is very funny. Which is also funny that he's even a corpse because in A New Beginning, the previous movie, the mayor reveals that he was cremated. So, yeah.
Oh, really?
And then they actually cut this out. Originally, they were finally going to introduce Jason's father, Elias, in this movie. And they were going to also have Pamela Voorhees's grave was going to be right next to Jason's, and they were going to have to figure out why, who paid for them to be put in the cemetery, and they were going to introduce his father. But Tom McLaughlin's like, no.
I actually thought about that.
Yeah, it's no, what, I just want Jason to keep going, so they completely scrapped all of that and just said we're just going to have Jason in the grave, and there he is, and that's how it's going to be, and then of course things go awry and people die.
Yeah, I haven't seen all of these movies. I've seen the first two. I've seen Jason. Like the Freddy franchise, I have seen the worst ones the most times. Like I've seen Jason Goes to Hell and Freddy's Dead more than any other films in those franchises. But this might be my favorite one that I've seen. By far.
It is by and large the best movie in the franchise, no question about it. I think the Tommy Jarvis trilogy of 4, 5, and 6, also having different actors in each movie play him, is the best of the franchise. Also, funny thing about there being multiple actors, the actor who played the older Tommy Jarvis in Part 5 was supposed to come back, but then he became a born-again Christian and wanted nothing to do with the franchise, and that's why they recast him.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so they got Tom Matthews, who was well known within the horror community for playing Freddy in Return of the Living Dead, and Tom McLaughlin didn't even know.
I actually meant to look that up if that was him.
Yeah, it's him. It's the kid from Return of the Living Dead, who also spoke to his supervisor in that movie was in Poltergeist. So that movie kind of has a lot of people who went off into were in different franchises, and yeah,
I actually really liked him as Tommy, and I did mean to look that up because Return of the Living Dead is one of the first horror movies I remember really fucking me up as a kid. That was one I saw way too young, and it's a comedy, but it's also just a dour film, so that one always stuck with me.
Yeah, I remember.
But, and he's also in the second one too as a different character.
Huh. Okay. Oh, in the second Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
I still haven't seen. I've only seen that first movie, and
the second one.
I'd like to get to the other ones. I am someone I do generally like to go check out any horror movie I can, because you never know when you'll find a little gem, with Friday the 13th Part 6. This is the sixth movie in a horror franchise. Is it actually going to be good? And it turns out, yeah, it actually is good.
Yeah, and I feel like most Friday fans will probably go up to bat for 4 and 6, but then there's the people who oh no, Jason X, man, that's the one, and I'm just never on that train.
No, me neither. And I saw Jason X and Jason Goes to Hell when I was younger. I actually, because I saw the first two fairly young, when I was about 11. And
yeah, I was pretty young, and I saw bits and pieces of the first one at my cousin's house. And it was just oh no, that's scary. I remember the Kevin Bacon arrow scene.
Oh my god, what a great!
And I was
kill,
oh
too.
No, I'm too young for this.
Yeah, and that's actually the reason why I think that's one of the reasons why I watched the first movie, is because I knew Kevin Bacon was in it, and that was right around the time in my life when I got really into Kevin Bacon.
As we all do.
I think my mom mentioned to me about the game around him, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, and we randomly found the book that the creators of the game wrote at a Goodwill, and I immediately
I've seen that in a Barnes
I
and Noble
immediately
before.
picked it up. I no longer have it. It's somewhere out in the ether. But I was flipping through, and I would use that as a guide to figure out what movies I wanted to watch. And that's how I finally watched Diner and Footloose and Tremors, and I got to watch all these wonderful movies that I continue to love to this day. Like, I am probably the number one Footloose fan in the world.
Oh, I love Footloose.
I fucking love that movie so much. And like,
that was like my mom's favorite movie, so I saw it a lot as a kid. And I'll be honest, I did not hate that remake either. I took my wife to see it. I was like, this is fine. It's not the Kevin Bacon one, but I
have no idea what you're talking about. There's no such thing. Totally did not happen.
Yeah, that this whole podcast is based on movies we'd like to say that about.
Look, and look, I know it exists. I have never seen it, and to be honest, I don't have the drive I don't have the desire to see it.
You don't need to be perfectly honest, but like, as someone who was taking their wife to see it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be watching it anyway, I might as well just like try to enjoy it, and it was fine. It's totally fine.
Sometimes you find those gems. Like, I remember my parents dragged me to go see 10,000 BC. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, I've only tried watching it once. It was while we were at work, though. I couldn't really pay attention to it, so I never got through it.
Dragged to go see it in the theater, and I genuinely tried to fall asleep watching that movie, and I just couldn't do it because I was like, oh no, this movie's actually kind of cool. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I like this franchise has always just been one that I've always been like, well, it's the lesser horror franchise for me. But like, so last year, or I guess it was like 2 years ago at this point, I had never seen all of the Halloween movies, and I borrowed the Blu-ray box set from a coworker, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go through them all. And I spent like a weekend just going through them all. And, it's the same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. I've only seen, random smatterings of the movies, but I was actually thinking of like, oh, maybe Friday the 13th will be the next one I go through, and this might be the kickstart for that, because I actually enjoyed this, and I was kind of skeptic going in.
Yeah, I will go ahead and let you know that most like there are certain stinkers in this franchise, but there are some movies where, like, because they're so short, like you can still enjoy them. Like, I will also really go to bat for the following movie, Part 7, The New Blood, mostly because I love the idea of bringing telekinesis into this franchise, and like that being the reason why he gets resurrected. If that was that one. Like, it's all about like a young woman who is, has telekinetic power since she was a child, and she's traumatized by the fact that she lashed out at her abusive father, and it caused him to fall in the lake and drown and die. So like, she and her mother and her doctor are returning to the lake, to her childhood home. Also, just across the way, there's a house where a bunch of teenagers, or like a bunch of young adults, are having a birthday party, and through her telekinetic powers, she accidentally resurrects Jason out of the lake, and that screws up everything. And it's a pretty good movie. And actually, another thing I wanted to bring up is this is, for some reason, the only movie in the franchise to have campers in it.
Is that true?
Yeah, none of the other, in the first movie, you've got all these camp counselors, like repairing the Camp Crystal Lake and trying to get ready for the season. That's when Pamela Voorhees comes along and destroys that whole idea. Then with the second movie, it's actually a different camp on the lake, but it's still just counselors getting ready. Like, they're at like a counselor camp themselves, like getting prepared for the campers to come. After that, parts 3, 4, and 5 all deal with just young adults. I think like part 3 is a bunch of friends go to a family friend's like house on the lake. Part 4 is the Jarvises live in a house out in that forest, and then a bunch of kids come stay at the house that's just across from them. And part 5 is Tommy Jarvis goes to a homegrown mental facility that is like out in the woods, not far from Crystal Lake. But this is the only one to actually have campers in it, because so I love that. I love like the idea that Jason won't kill kids because he still kind of sees himself as a kid, and he doesn't want to.
Yeah, I've always heard people describe Jason as he's just a kid in a grown-up body, and that does kind of check out there because I mean he's been a kid living in the woods since he was allegedly drowned. And yeah, like he doesn't know anything. I don't think he speaks in any of the movies, or I think some grunts in 3 and 4 or something like that. But like he is just kind of this big child with rage he can't control. It seems like.
And
but there's
being disfigured, and that being one of the catalysts for him to be bullied when he was a child too. And that's another thing, is that like he's kind of like that unfortunate case of a bully, the bully to becoming a bully, because the wonderful writer Stephen Graham Jones points out, like the killers in slasher movies are like the ultimate bullies, and that's why we root for the final girl. We root for them because they're the ones who get to stand up to the bully, and they win. And it's like we all wish that we could have been the person to stand up to the bully. And
which, that's another good point to bring up here, is it doesn't really have a final girl, because like Tommy is kind of the main character. Megan is there.
I would like to think that Tommy and Megan got to, like, after this they went to a whole lot of therapy, and dealt with this in a healthy way, got married, and went off and lived a quiet little life out in the countryside somewhere, far away from a lake.
Yeah, because this is the last one he appears in, right?
He doesn't come back.
That character.
I think he pops up in a comic book somewhere. But he does act like Tom Matthews actually did come back for a fan film called Never Hike Alone to reprise his role as Tommy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there are a couple fan films, and Tom McLaughlin he recently revealed that he has been for years working on a sequel, like a direct sequel to Jason Lives.
Yeah, I did see that before we started recording. I was doing some reading, because the Friday rights have been in litigation for a long time, and that recently just wrapped up, and the rights went to I can't remember his name, Victor or something.
I believe it's Victor Miller, the writer of the first movie.
Yeah. So yeah, he now has the rights, and so it sounds like that movie might not be able to happen unless those two guys kind of make friends.
I hope they do.
I guess.
I hope they will.
Yeah, I think he's got his own draft currently.
Yeah, I like Tom McLaughlin's idea of like setting like having it be a follow-up to Jason Lives, but this time like setting it in the winter, so like you have Jason out in the snow for the first time, and having like a bunch of young, like a brand new cast of characters, all female, out in like having no idea, they don't know the legend of Jason, so they're like it becomes like a almost like a murder mystery to them, like they're trying to figure out what is causing who's killing all of these people, and trying to figure out how how it's being done and who's doing it and how they can stop it. And I like that idea of like turning Jason to like a murder mystery in the snow.
I'd be into that. Yeah, I've definitely heard like multiple people say they want to do a Friday the 13th in the snow. But like I feel like if you were to kind of do a new one, I think this would maybe be a really good place to jump off from. And if you were to, like, for instance, give it like the Halloween 2018 treatment of like, oh, we're going to do a sequel to this one and ignore the other ones, I think like bringing back the Tommy character, and if you can get the same actor, that's great, is like kind of the good nostalgia pull maybe for that movie, because considering that's just what we do now.
Well, McLaughlin has also said that he just can't figure out what he would do with Tommy, so he did not include Tommy at all in his script. Like he just, no one from previous movies would be included in this movie. It's all new characters outside of Jason.
That's also
and I like that idea. Also, you bringing up like Halloween having multiple timelines, which I just find fascinating to think about every once in a while. Friday the 13th, I feel like does have multiple timelines, and I think that mostly has to do with like the New Line Cinema movies that started with Jason Goes to Hell, but they just never discuss it They never like no one ever says like, oh yeah, like the 2018 movie is a direct sequel to the first movie, or Resurrect, or like the Halloween 3 is off in its own universe or anything. Like no one ever talks about that. Here it's just kind of like an unspoken rule of like, oh yeah, this one is probably like, Jason Goes to Hell. Jason Goes to Hell has to be like a direct sequel to like 3 or 4, like probably like 3 maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but like it's one of those situations where all of these movies are kind of loose enough where it's like, oh, just watching them, you could assume they all come one after the other. But like, if you really wanted to look at it, there probably is like you said, kind of parts where you could branch off and make it its own
it's
thing.
like superhero comics. Like continuity is sometimes not much of a thing, and it's you pick and choose what it is and isn't canon.
Yeah. Like Jason X can just always be the last one if you really want to boil that down. But,
I mean, it really is. It's set like 445 years into the future.
Yeah, and then then we have the next one they did was a reboot. So technically Freddy versus Jason, which who knows where you want to place that in the timeline.
On Earth X, I don't know.
Yeah, which Freddy vs. Jason, one of my favorites. Not super big on either one of those franchises, but that movie is so much fun.
Yeah, it is like the epitome of stupid dumb fun.
Yeah, and I think like this movie, one of the reasons I like it is it has a style. It has a visual look to it that is unique versus a lot of the other movies just kind of feel like a bunch of people hanging out in the woods.
Oh yeah, like this. Like I was thinking about this go around. I realized that I think this is the best looking of the franchise. Like, and I think that has to do with, McLaughlin is just well known as a student of classic quote unquote horror cinema, and has worked in the industry for so long. I mean, prior to directing his movies, he was like working as an actor, usually as working as the monster in movies. Like most notably he was the monster or the creature in the John Frankenheimer movie Prophecy. Nothing to do with the Christopher Walken movie The Prophecy, but I have to differentiate the two because they're completely different movies. But like he's also like apparently the Jabberwocky in one of the like Alice in Wonderland movies that came out in like the 70s or 80s. Which I had no idea even existed until I looked it up. But yeah, honestly, it's funny, like after this movie, you think that McLaughlin would be launched into stardom and like continue to make movies, but he really didn't do, like he has done it quite a bit since then, but he's made a lot of made for TV movies, a lot of Lifetime movies. He directed an adaptation of the Stephen King short story Sometimes They Come Back for TV.
Which I've seen. That's like the only other thing in his filmography that I've actually seen.
Yeah, and it's good. It's good.
Those movies freaked me out.
Yeah, One Dark Night just recently got a brand new Blu-ray release that I think has like a director's cut because he was notably like not quite happy with the cut of that movie. Like it was taken away from him and recut, and they changed the ending. And he's like the one now is fine, but there's a different cut that you can see now. And the movie he made after this,
Meg Tilly's in that.
Yeah,
movie.
Meg Tilly. She's the lead. Adam West is in it. As
wow. Oh
yeah, and he's pretty.
I might have to look this up.
It's pretty. If you listeners, if you have Shudder, you can watch One Dark Night there.
Oh, yeah. Awesome! I don't have Shudder. I
totally recommend getting Shudder, if only so you can watch that. And then also get to watching Creepshow, the TV show. It's the show.
I forgot that existed.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, really good. That first season can be a little tough to get through, but if you really want to, you can just completely skip it and go over to season 2. Since every episode is 2 stories, so that one the first season is okay. And but it still has some gems. But that second season, especially the Joe Lynch directed sequences, they're great. But that whole second season is great, and I think season 3 just came out as well.
I just need to bite the bullet and get Shudder because I know there's a lot of stuff on there I want to check out.
And also, what's great about Shudder, it's like $6. It's super
Yeah.
cheap.
Oh yeah, I should totally do it then.
So I highly recommend. I recommend checking out One Dark Night. It's pretty fun. I think it's also a movie that would definitely benefit from a remake. In just
Yeah.
I think like my major issue with that movie is the supernatural / paranormal elements of the movie aren't tied at all to Meg Tilly's character, and I think it would benefit the film a lot if it was tied to her, her being the main character.
Yeah.
So whatever. But there is Tom McLaughlin. I think the only other movie like released in theaters, or he made 2 other movies that got released in theaters. The most recent was from like 2000. It was a movie called The Unsaid, starring Andy Garcia, and the only other movie he did was right after this, and I think it was Date with an Angel, I think it was called, and it's about a
something. Yeah, I saw that on there.
It's such a weird premise. It's such a weird premise.
I'm honestly surprised he didn't direct more of these, because like this one clearly is like one of the better directed ones of the franchise, that I'm surprised he didn't just get offered the next one right away.
They might have, but I think he turned it down just because he didn't want to like get stuck in this franchise. And it's funny also, like he's even talked about like he is not like a slasher fan, but like this one just came up as an opportunity, and he felt like this was a good time for him to, because like with the fact that like people were so kind of like upset with the last movie not involving Jason, they really just let him have total freedom in the story of this movie. So he got to do whatever he wanted, and with that, he decided, well, like slashers have been around for a number of years. I think it's time to really like kind of like just poke fun at them. And you talking about Scream. Funny thing, Tom McLaughlin actually was in line to direct Scream, and he ultimately didn't. But when he was almost attached to it, he did meet with Kevin Williamson, and when they got to talking, Williamson told McLaughlin that Jason Lives was a major influence on him as a kid and was the reason why he wrote Scream.
That I feel like I heard that. So I recently went through and just rewatched all 4 Scream movies, and I think I was watching some video talking about that.
Yeah. So there you go. Watch this movie, if nothing else, for the fact that it's the reason we have Scream.
Yeah, which, hey, all those Scream movies are pretty good.
The third one is the one that I'm very iffy on, but
it's the weakest, but like rewatching it, it's still like fine.
It's also the only one not written by Williamson. I think that's the reason why.
Did he do 4?
He did 4.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't sure. He did all but 3. And it just so happens that
he wrote like a treatment, but he wasn't available to write the full screenplay. So they had to bring in someone else. And it shows.
Yeah, and that writer Aaron Kruger is also a writer that I'm not usually a big fan. I think the one movie that they've written that I did enjoy was the first Ring movie with Naomi Watts, and that's about it. Because like that was also the writer who did like Transformers: Dark of the Moon, and I think that was also
he did 3 Transformers movies.
Yeah, there you go. And I think he also...
That explains so much.
I want to say he also wrote the Tim Burton Dumbo movie.
He did?
Yeah.
Oh, and that movie was
awful.
And
there you go. Like, that was actually, like, when I found out he was the writer, I was like, ooh, I don't think that movie is going to be very good. And...
Nope. He wrote all of the Ring movies.
Okay, yeah. Well...
And Reindeer Games. Yeah, this guy does not have a good track record.
That's the same with, like, Akiva Goldsman. Like, he really has a terrible track record. Outside of the 2 John Grisham adaptations he wrote for Joel Schumacher.
Oh, man. This guy wrote the new Top Gun. I actually had hope for that, too.
Aaron Kruger? No, I don't... he's not working on that movie, is he?
Yeah, Top Gun Maverick is on his Wikipedia.
Oh, no. He's
one of 3 writers on it, but Christopher McQuarrie also wrote on it, and he is great, so maybe he just did, like, the initial draft.
He had to. I'm actually gonna be looking this up right now. Oh, yep, there he is as a screenwriter. Shit.
Yep. And he was, uncredited for Scream 4.
Okay. Well, there you go. So, if nothing else, like this movie inspired Scream, and that's important. And it's funny, like I would say the three best slashers of all time are like the ones that are really poking fun at the slasher franchise. It'll be this, Scream, and Freaky, which came out last year, and I think is...
Oh god, yeah, I still very much need to see
Freaky. Yeah, Freaky is... I think that along with Love and Monsters and Birds of Prey were like my favorites from last year. Now, granted, there were a lot of movies from last year I still need to get to, but those are the three that really stand out to me. Yeah, 2020, just for some reason, I was just like, I was not watching anything that was coming out that year. I was actually instead going back and trying to catch up on all the stuff that I already hadn't seen from years past. So like last year, I think I maybe saw like a max of like 10 movies from last year. Maybe not even that.
Yeah, I'm still trying to catch up on a bunch of 2020 movies, but yeah, like I think because the slasher is not my favorite horror genre. I'm more of like a psychological horror guy, or like I like a mystery, which I think is why I like Scream and like some movies like that. But like I very much enjoy slashers that are kind of looking at the genre as a whole, and like the scenes with the kids in this movie just kind of like talking about, we're definitely dead meat or whatever. And the one like, what were you gonna be when you grew up?
I love
like,
that
I was
line
like,
so
what
much.
is this movie?
I love that line so much. And like the little girl and actually that brings me to one of my favorite unsung heroes in this movie is I don't remember the actor's name, but the character Paula. And she's the one who like goes up to the little girl Nancy and is like telling her like, you know, it's like when I like, you know what I would do when I was afraid when I was a little girl, I would count, I would close my eyes and count. When I would open my eyes, the monster would be gone. Give like MVP of this movie to be like unsung MVP in this movie, because like she quickly goes from being terrified on her own, but once the kids get scared, she immediately goes into mom mode and is like trying to calm the kids down and doing a beautiful job at it.
Yeah.
Love Paula. She is the best. She is, in my notes I put, she is the big sister we all wish we had.
Yeah, she was legitimately great. Because like, yeah, as far as like Megan's character, like she kind of just gets roped up with Tommy and doesn't really accomplish a lot.
I love Megan though. I love the fact that she's just like, I am hot for this guy, but also he is like he's super weird, but that's kind of cute. And also, and once he starts spouting his Jason shit, I'm going to help him.
Yeah, like without even, she never second guesses him for a second throughout the movie. She's like, oh no, I believe him. Let's just help him.
Because he's hot.
And meanwhile, her dad is the worst sheriff in history.
Yep, and unfortunately, this was the last movie that Jennifer Cook ever was in. This was like after this movie, she retired from acting and she went on to do other things. And I was like, it's kind of a bummer. I mean, like good for her for pursuing whatever other career path she wanted, but I kind of wish that she had gone on to do more things.
Yeah, like her character didn't have a lot from like a writing perspective, but she had a lot of charisma in the role and like was enjoyable.
Yeah, like everything, like every moment she was just like, no, I'm the only person who drives this car. Screw you. That was great.
Yeah, like I enjoyed her presence. That's unfortunate. I mean, yeah, good for her if she went on and found her happiness. But I wonder what else she could have done.
Yeah, it'd been nice. I would love to see, even if she like popped up like in a cameo in a later movie. That would have been cool. Yeah. Like I said, if they do a new one, I think maybe bringing back some characters might be a way in. But I don't know. I honestly don't know what you would do with this franchise. At this point. I think after the disaster of that remake, I feel like the franchise it felt like for a long time that killed the franchise, and now that the rights issues have been laid to rest, I feel like there is definitely a new movie on the horizon, and I'm very curious in what direction they're going to take it.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I actually enjoy the remake for what it is, but like I said, that's always been because I have never seen a lot of these movies, and that one I was just like, hey, I enjoy it for what it was.
Yeah, I'm not much of an I was for a while, but I'm no longer a Marcus Nispel fan. He directed that and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake and the Conan the Barbarian remake and the Pathfinder remake. Like everything he directed was like a remake.
So this guy just remakes.
Yeah,
everything.
and unfortunately, it's like there is always like a lesser version of the original.
Yeah, although I do know a lot of people that like that Texas Chainsaw one. Like I feel like that and the Friday the 13th are kind of looked at as like, well, you know, they're not the best, but they're like better remakes than like what we get most of the time.
I will say I do like that one, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning. It was like a prequel to the remake. It has like Jordana Brewster and Matt Bomer and like introduces like introduces the family in a different way, and I kind of enjoyed that one just because like the fact is like, okay, this is a prequel and the family is still around in that other movie, so that means everyone has to die, and you're just kind of sitting there just like, oh geez, like it's kind of fun and it's nihilism in a way.
Yeah. Which was just the era of nihilism with
horror
films.
Like because this was around that time when like Martyrs was coming out and Hostel was out.
Yeah, like horror in the 2000s almost put me off of horror just because like everything was kind of the same. Like it's just gonna end where everybody dies, and that's kind of just what we're doing.
Yeah, and
now.
I think there was also like this was post 9/11, so they were dealing with a lot of that. Like I know, actually this actually reminds me of another of my favorite little nods in this movie. Like I remember Mick Garris was talking about how like, there's this documentary I used to watch a lot, and I actually rewatched it this morning just to, kind of get prepared for this. There's this documentary called Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue: The Evolution of the American Horror Film, and it's I used to really love it, and having rewatched it now, it's fine. A major unfortunate part of it is that like every person they interview is a white dude, so there isn't much. There's only really one perspective in it.
Yeah.
But Mick Garris was talking about how like a lot of the horror films that we look back on now as like classics at the time really like they probably didn't think they had like a political agenda, but we look back on them now, like we can look back on like a Night of the Living Dead and see see a movie where an unarmed black man an innocent black man is senselessly murdered, and we can look back on that with 2021 eyes and see what that like we can dig into that. But at the time, that's just
and if you ask George Romero, that would not be his take on it.
I mean, I feel like he definitely changed his answer later. And like like I didn't think of it that way at the time, but now that people say it, I totally agree with it. But he was talking about like in the future we're going to be looking back on movies that we make now that just seem like entertainment. We're going to look back on them and see the messages, like insert messages into them, like and he mentioned Hostel in particular, like a movie about xenophobia and how Americans, arrogant Americans can come in and just screw things up, and Europeans lashing out at that, and I was like, that's an interesting take. But another of my favorite nods in this movie is actually to Mick Garris. The sheriff, his name is Mike Garris.
Yeah,
and Mick Garris, what an unsung, like actually both him and Tom McLaughlin are like these. If you're like within the horror community, those two names, and like they are like the grandfathers, like the grandpas, or like the fun uncles of the horror community.
Yeah, well, what did he did like Critters?
Yeah, he did.
Sleepwalkers?
I think the first movie he did was Critters 2, and then also interesting enough. So I'm a big fan of the Psycho franchise. Like it's weird that like the Psycho sequels are actually good, and
they are actually. I watched them for the first time like a few years ago.
And he directed the fourth one, the made-for-TV one that like deals with the relationship between Norma and a young Norman, and
which I will say that's the only one I haven't watched yet. I bought like a 4-pack at like a half price books that came with 2, 3, 4, and then like the TV pilot from like the 70s or 80s or something. And I watched 2 and 3, and then I was getting ready to do 4, and that's when we moved into our new apartment. And I just haven't gone back to it.
I highly recommend that fourth one. Olivia Hussey as Norma Bates is great, but Henry Thomas, like this was like late 80s, so this was him, a few years removed from E.T. Him as Norman as a young Norman is great, and it was actually because of that movie that he got the job of directing Sleepwalkers, because that movie also has the mother-son incest in it.
Yeah.
And so look, I know like people like clown on Sleepwalkers. I recently rewatched it. The movie's awesome. It is such weird, fun entertainment, and it's such a fucked up weird movie. I love it.
I've only seen bits and pieces of it, but I've been having this urge to go back and like rewatch a lot of these older movies from like that I saw stuff of when I was a kid and I just don't remember them. Like I want to go back and watch a lot of the old Stephen King adaptations like Christine and Pet Sematary that I haven't seen since I was younger. And like that one has been on my list of revisiting.
Yeah, a lot of those Stephen King adaptations hold up real well. I mean, like Christine being directed by John Carpenter is great. I love that we're getting a new adaptation from Brian Fuller. That's a great idea. The one that I'm surprised holds up so well is Cujo.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. Most of those Stephen King movies, aside from like The Shining, which I see like once a year, like I haven't seen since I was a kid. And like I literally just saw a screenshot from Cujo like yesterday on Twitter, and I was like, oh, I should rewatch that.
It's insane how well that movie is made. It is incredible. I definitely have to say like one of the best like underseen Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah, I'm sure he hates it as he does.
Oh no, he loves it.
Adaptations.
He actually does like enjoy most of the adaptations. It's just that a lot of people think he doesn't like them, but at the end of the day, like he just doesn't care. Like people ask him about him, but I get the feeling at the end of the day he's like, like the movie is the movie and my book is my book and the book will live on. Like the only one that he just doesn't like is The Shining. And
yeah, he was not, and he went on and made his own version.
Yeah, and it's not very good, and he knows it. But like if you go back to like before, like as the movie was coming out, he was actually like he still didn't like it, but he was a lot less harsh on it at the time. And I think that was mostly due to the fact that the critics were already harsh on that movie. So he felt like he's like, I don't want to
just jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to like criticize it too much because it's already getting so much flack. But then later on, as like it was becoming like people sort of recognizing it as a classic, I think he was bitter about it mostly because it was starting to overshadow his book. And so like whenever you say The Shining, immediately everyone thinks, here's Johnny, or they think Red Rum. They don't think of the book, and I think he's kind of bitter about that. But at the end of the day, like he's written, like 60 books at this point. He's probably he's closing in on 70 at this point. He's made so much money off of everything, and I think at the end of the day, he's just like, I don't care. Like the book is the book, the movie is the movie. Like as long as people are reading my books, I don't care.
Yeah, I actually stumbled across a YouTube video the other day that some guy, which I don't know how many it was at the time, but ranking all 60-something Stephen King books. I keep
seeing that popping up on my YouTube page, and I'm like, I have no desire to watch that.
I think I'm just gonna throw it on while I work one day and just like kind of listen to it just to see where he falls on stuff. Mostly because I'm curious what the number one will end up being.
I mean, there's a potential. It's probably going to be either there's definitely two that it could be, either The Shining or The Stand.
I was gonna say The Stand.
It's usually The Stand. I know a lot of people like point to that one as their favorite. Like, my favorite personally is Salem's Lot, and it's also in general my favorite book of all time, mostly because I love vampires and I love the idea of vampires slowly taking over a small town and like no one really knowing about it.
Yeah,
I love that idea. But I'm a big fan of like the weirder ones. Like, I think I'm in the minority in that I think the 90s is the most interesting period for Stephen King as a writer, because this was him coming off of, this was him finally sobering up, and he kind of stepped away from horror a little bit, or supernatural and horror of that nature, the last one was like Needful Things, where like he actually had like Leland Gaunt as this like demonic entity. But after that, you've got Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne and Rose Madder and Desperate. Like, so like a lot of these books that dealt with just real life horror events or would have very, very minor supernatural elements, like The Green Mile has John Coffey, or like Insomnia. Insomnia is really weird. Is like, it's one of the most overt links to the Dark Tower series, and is 900 pages. It's way too long, but I love it. I'm probably like the number one Insomnia fan, because it's just such a weird book.
This is where I show my ass a little bit and say I have never read a Stephen King book, but I own multiple of them.
I own every single one, and I'm slowly working through all of them. I'm currently reading Rose Madder, and it's very interesting to read, especially now since it deals with a someone who is running from her abuser and is trying to make a life for herself, and it's a very interesting read now.
Yeah, I made a point of I've read like some of his short stories and stuff, but I just never finished one of his novels. And I asked for a few for Christmas like a few years ago, and my wife's aunt bought me some, and now she's on this kick where anytime she buys a Stephen King book and finishes it, she's like, "Oh, do you just want it?" So like every time somebody goes over there and then they're coming over to our place, they're just always bringing me Stephen King books.
I love it.
I went from like, I had like 3 because they got me It, The Stand, and then one of like some random short story one that they got from what looks like a used bookstore or whatever. But now I have like The Outsider and one called The Institute that I'm looking at right now. Like I've just been slowly building a Stephen King collection.
I think you'd really enjoy The Outsider. That's one of my like top 5 as The Outsider.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the first one. I was going to start with The Stand just because that was one I specifically asked for, because I'm like, oh, it's like the Stephen King book, so I was going to try to start with that one, but like The Outsider with the show having just come out, which I didn't see, but
yeah, I still haven't seen the show.
I might just start with that one.
From what I've heard, the show is good. It kind of spins its wheels a little bit and it could have, because it's 10 episodes and it could have probably been like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Which, that happens and it's fine. But yeah, the book is great. I love the fact that it's like, it's like a police procedural and then delves into the horror like halfway through the book. It's pretty great.
Which I love, like detective and police stuff. So that was another reason why I wanted to start.
Yeah, no, like one. I'm currently like rewatching Criminal Minds, and I'm like, I'm kind of mad at how much I like this show. Like it's kind of like, because also I love true crime, and like I listen to like constantly I've been listening to like Let's Not Meet and My Favorite Murder, and I'm like slowly going like, man, I should probably be digging into like the Anne Rule books, like The Stranger Beside Me and Small Sacrifices and stuff like that. And now like going through another like watch of Criminal Minds, and like with the intention of actually finishing it, because I've never finished it, because I usually get to like season 6 or 7 or whatever and I stop watching it. But I'm currently like at the end of season 2, and I'm like, oh god, I'm mad at how much I like this show.
Yeah, my wife is a Law and Order SVU fanatic, so anytime she's watching, I'll usually be sitting in the room, like kind of watching it with her.
Yeah, and actually, I have a friend of mine, Matt Storm. His wife is actually on an episode of SVU. Yeah, she's
really?
I think a couple
That's
episodes
awesome.
Actually.
That's great. Yeah, we are way off topic here.
Hey, that's totally fine. We're still talking about horror.
Yeah, no, it's totally within the ballpark, so it counts. But yeah, why don't we start wrapping up here? Do you have any closing thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 6? Which, like we said before, how many horror franchises can be as good as this movie this far in?
Yeah, I guess my closing thoughts is just like, everyone could watch this movie. Like, it's so much fun, and I love that we're talking about this. Like, as of recording, we're like 5 days away from Halloween, so this is the perfect time to watch it. And also just like check out the whole franchise. Like the like a lot. I feel like a lot of people like will give this, not just this movie, like like the whole franchise as kind of gives it some flack, but thankfully these movies are so short that, that they are just, as we've keep saying, like that popcorn fueled dumb fun. And this one is the best of it all. And it's just, you just sit down and just have some fun for 85 minutes.
Yeah, honestly, that one phrase really reframed the whole franchise for me. Of these are popcorn horror movies, which I didn't even really realize would be a thing. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Even as someone who doesn't generally dive in on this franchise, it has maybe convinced me to start a marathon. So I have to highly recommend this one.
Yes, yeah, and also probably a great triple feature of this would be you watch Jason Lives and Scream and Freaky, and that's a perfect little triple feature night for you.
Yeah, I really need to get on.
Damn,
Freaky.
I might be doing that for Halloween now. Shit, I just gave myself an idea.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I just watched Halloween Kills, so I don't have anything else going on for horror films right now.
Did you like Halloween Kills?
I enjoyed most of Halloween Kills. I absolutely thought the last 5 minutes was trash, but it doesn't really hurt the whole movie for me. But it really felt like I don't want to. It's still fairly fresh. I don't want to spoil it, but I will say it should have ended in the street, and you should have picked up the next movie right from that point. And I guess I'll kind of just leave it at that. I can go more details off.
So when Redacted was redacted in the final scene, were you as mad as I was?
Very much.
Yeah, because it's
I was like,
that
wait, what? That's it?
Yeah,
huh?
I mean, look, I think I'm far more positive on the movie than most people are. But that
I would agree.
Yeah,
with that.
I really enjoy the movie for what it was going for and how just silly and over the top it got. I was because I love that it was that was a major change of pace from the 2018 movie, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, which I love the 2018
I do too.
movie. That is legitimately my favorite movie in the franchise. I love the first one, but that 2018 one, it captivated me. I don't know why, but yeah, it's a little more silly than that one, which I was at first slightly disappointed in, but I was like, you know what? It's fun, and it's kind of continuing that, but also homaging some of the other ones, and it really was just the last 5 minutes. It felt like, all right, wrap it up, and I was like, that's not the way. They should have done this better.
And we're getting one more. We're getting Halloween Ends next year, and yeah. I'm very interested now with what they've done in Halloween Kills. I'm very interested in what they're going to be doing with Halloween Ends.
Yeah, my only worry there is they say there might be a time jump and they might address the pandemic, and I'm like, leave that out of it. We don't need that in this franchise. I'm
sorry, what was that? You kind of cut out there.
Oh, sorry. I was saying my only worry with that new one is that they're saying there might be a time jump and that they might address the pandemic in the new one, and I'm just like, I don't think you really need to address the pandemic in a Halloween movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they probably don't need to do that. I mean, look, all in all, I'm excited for whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, I just, give me more of that, and then I'm curious to see if they try to do a Halloween 3 again after that.
Yeah, probably not, but whatever.
Yeah.
We should probably end this.
But yeah, so before we get out of here, do you got anything you'd like to promote?
Absolutely.
Give them
I have two podcasts. I have my main show, Comics Quest, where every week I have a different guest, and I will dive into a comic that I think is a perfect entry point for new readers into comic books. You can follow us on Twitter at Comics Quest Show. And I also, along with my friend Angela Bones Bullock, host the podcast Fables and Reflections, where we dive into the world of Neil Gaiman, going over all the books, movies, TV shows, comics, everything that we're working our way through the Sandman and doing that every other episode. So you can find that on Twitter and Instagram at FNR And both those shows are under the Certain POV network. Please check out all the podcasts there. You can check out all that stuff at certainpov.com.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for making me watch this movie and giving it another chance.
Thank you for having me, and I'd love to come back, and I have so many other movies I want to defend.
Oh, absolutely. You will most certainly be welcome back. But thank you for being here, and I want to thank everybody for listening.